We know they don't work.
They do work.
Look what we have. Look what we have. We had a moderate president, and we have crime exploding everywhere. We had a Democrat president promised that he was going to be moderate, promised that he was going to unite the country, and now we have a terrible education system. We have no border. We have crime everywhere. Every facet of society is in peril and in chaos because our elections don't matter.
Greg Gutfeld was fired up on the 5 yesterday when he and the rest of the panel were discussing the recent looting that took place in Philadelphia last week. Now, before we show you what led to Gutfeld claiming elections don't work, we need to give you context on why he's angry in the first place. So police made a total of 70 arrests, and Philadelphia DA Larry Krasner said they have opened cases in all but one of those arrests. So 69 cases opened. He said he would hand out justice appropriately for what he referred to as unrest. And then he elaborated in a statement, which I will read in part. A large number of them are young. They are between the ages of 18 and 25. In general, what we're seeing is that most of them have no criminal record or a minimal criminal record. There are certainly some people in this group who are much more concerning than others. Part of our task will be to make sure we do individual justice in each of these cases. And then he went on further to speak with the Fox News affiliate, and he had this to say: we'll look carefully to see whether this is a one-off situation and they're fundamentally law-abiding people, hold them accountable one way, or whether they are criminals and they are all about taking advantage of some sort of unrest for their own benefit, and they will be prosecuted another way. So what he was how he was approaching this was with balance, taking into account the age of the people that were arrested, taking into account their criminal history. But his critics, like those at Fox News, are not seeing this as an even-handed justice, his appeal to even-handed justice. They're saying that it's him being too soft on crime. Now, Gutfeld didn't like this naturally and compared the looters to January 6th, saying that the looters get a mulligan or a do-over while the January 6th insurrectionists don't.
Certain people get criminal mulligans, and January 6 protesters, they don't get criminal mulligans, and here's why. They're the oppressor, right? So the oppressed get criminal mulligans. The people that are complaining, like us, we're actually oppressors, and we're losing power, so that's why we're upset. I just got a job at MSNBC. But let's compare the rights between criminals and victims. Okay, the criminals, they get a mulligan. They get to steal up to $900 worth of stuff. They can loiter, sleep, and shoot up in public areas, including playgrounds. They can loot and burn and call it social justice. They can pile up dozens of arrests and never do time. Meanwhile, what about us? Well, we have to change our lives to accommodate risk wherever we go. We have to move out of cities for the sake of the safety of our families and our own safety. That's what's happening. We're being driven out of cities by the oppressed.
Yeah, if you thought that what you heard was Greg Gutfeld pretend that stealing items from a store is equivalent, if not worse than storming the Capitol on January 6th, your ears did not deceive you. That is exactly what he said. Now, he's also attempting to frame this so that the DA appears to be letting everybody go, which, as we discussed, is not the case. In fact, they've already started filing charges against some of these individuals, charges including burglary, conspiracy, criminal trespass, riot, criminal mischief, disorderly conduct, incidentally, some of the same charges that he's saying aren't being levied against them that were being levied against individuals involved in January 6th. So kind of undermines the entire argument he's making. By the way, Greg Gutfeld said he can't live in a big city. Ask him where he lives. Ask him where he lives, because it's not in some backwoods rural county. He lives in a big city. But our friend Gutty didn't stop there. He decided to do like other conservatives and say, he invoked Tim Pool, the spirit of Tim Pool, in saying that the only solution is civil war.
We had a war over slavery. We knew slavery was inhumane and immoral, but somehow we couldn't solve slavery peacefully. It was an evil, but one side refused to acknowledge that it was evil because it was too big of an admission for them to make. Doesn't that feel that way now? That this defiant refusal to reverse this decline argues against the survival of a country. What does that leave you with? It leaves you with you need to make war to bring peace, because you have a side that cannot change, because then that means an admission that their beliefs have been corrupt all the time. So in a way, you have to force them to surrender.
Or we could make love, not war.
I tried that once.
Or we have an election.
I had to go to a doctor.
Right. Election.
Yeah.
No, elections don't work. We know that. We know they don't work.
I love how Fox News hosts always invoke the history of the Civil War and slavery in this country and imagine themselves as though they would have been fighting for the Union when the policies they support and the things they believe suggest heavily otherwise, but I'll just leave that there. Obviously, the call for violence isn't new coming from the right wing, and it's becoming scary how many people think the time for violence is upon us. Here's some from Public Religion Research Institute that says Republicans, 30%, are approximately 3 times as likely as Democrats, 11%, to agree with the statement. Because things have gotten so far off track, true American patriots may have to resort to violence in order to save our country. Agreement with the statement rises to 40% among Republicans who most trust far-right news sources and is 32% among those who most trust Fox News. We also have this poll that shows about 4 in 10 Republicans and independents say violent action against the government is sometimes justified, and you have to believe that a lot of this change in opinion on the use of political violence is coming because of the rhetoric of these Fox News hosts. I mean, he saw a video of some pretty young kids stealing stuff from a store, which I'm not condoning, but his immediate thought was, oh, civil war. It's time for civil war. They're stealing from Nordstrom Rack. They're stealing from Walgreens. That's equal to slavery in Greg Gutfeld's mind and a justification for civil war. I mean, and Cenk, of course, it's not just, I mentioned Tim Pool, but it's not just those two that are, using this violent rhetoric with regularity to a large audience that believes that the election was stolen and is becoming increasingly more violent. And I mean, it's a scary time.
Yeah, there's 2 issues here, and one is definitely more important than the other. So there's the issue of the looting, and you could get into a long debate about whether Larry Krasner's statement was the right optics or not the right optics when you're gonna prosecute those guys anyway. And they are prosecuting them. So look, is it surprising that the right wing is harping on crime, et cetera? Not at all surprising. Is it true that there's more crime? We've discussed this, debated this before. I think it is true, and there's stats to prove it. But is it surprising that the Fox News hosts are going to lie and say that they're going to criminal mulligan when they're not? Is it surprising that they would say that the guys who attempted a coup against America are the same as a guy who stole toothpaste or whatever the hell they stole out of that store, or even an iPod? Okay. Do iPods still exist? Anyways, I meant to say iPhone. But to me, that's a minor issue compared to the giant issue of this guy egging on violence to a significant size audience. I mean, that's 2 to 3 million people that are watching there. As he says, the only way to get to peace is through war. Now, aren't you gonna do something about these guys? Maybe it's time for war. And when, especially at a time when 40% of Republicans, 41% of independents, 23% of Democrats are saying that it might be, sometimes violence might be justified. 30% of Republicans saying that time might be right now for patriots to act in a violent way. Even if you take the lower number, 30% of Republicans is an enormous number. We're talking about 25 million people, and that's just the voters of Republicans, let alone everyone else. So to egg that on is beyond irresponsible. And I think it should be taken off the air. It's the one thing to say outrageous opinions, lies, etc. It's another thing to foment violence on the airwaves. It has a Rwanda feel to it.
Here's what's hilarious and also sad. Fox is not serious. Let's just be clear. Like the idea that you are hosting the debates while one of your lead anchors are saying we don't believe in elections, they don't work. Why are we debating? Why are you spending so much of your resources to host these debates? Furthermore, Cenk is right, crime is up. But what Greg wouldn't tell you is that crime crime is up more in Republican states, and that trend has been. We're talking about violent crimes like gun deaths are up in Republican spaces more than they are in Democratic spaces. But the idea of crime and how they see crime is in the words. This man is worried about $800 or $900 from Apple, but not $250 million from the government and Trump. So if he's upset that these kids stole $800 or $900 or even $1,000 worth of Apple gear, where is this fear? Where's this anger about Trump? Why are you calling a civil war against Trump and those who support him stealing $250 million from one state? Furthermore, I am so tired of white people on that side of the aisle using slavery metaphors to every chance they get. If he would have said oppressor and oppressed one more time, I think I would have flipped out. This idea that white people are losing America, white people are losing this country, their country. They versus we have to leave the city. We have to fear for our families. They, like it is beyond code words in this conversation. These false equivalents that white people are going through a point where they need to have civil war to take back their country sounds just like Greg is saying we need to figure out another way to enslave these people.
Yeah, I just want to double down on what one of the things Mondale said there about gun deaths. That's such a good point, and I hadn't thought about it that way. I mean, the gun deaths are way up. They're up in red states. That's part of the reason why crime has gone up is because of all the violence in LA. Homicides have gone up because there's guns everywhere. Tremendous gun sales have led to significant gun deaths. If in response to that, the left-wing response was, all right, well, let's start a civil war and start killing the other side because they're killing us. That would be crazy. But first of all, those folks are killing people. Like they're not stealing iPhones. Mass shooting after mass shooting, let alone the individual gun homicides, let alone the gun suicides, etc. But the mass shootings inside a black church, inside synagogues, targeting people, black folks at a store, targeting Latinos in Texas, etc. I mean, there's already, in a sense, they've already started a civil war and they're already attacking and killing. There's no equivalent shootings at white places, nor should they ever be. And we would never encourage that. And here comes Greg Gutfeld on Fox News encouraging further violence by the right wing when they're the ones doing the violence in the first place. So it's irresponsible, doesn't begin to cover it. The things he said there are super dangerous.
Yeah, I agree. I think we were shocked by how accurate that is. Why are you making sense on TV? What are you doing making sense? Like Fox, you should be like Fox. And let's be honest. And Ray, you know this. Let's be absolutely clear. This is not about crime. This is not about what's going on. I mean, like the lies that he said about the economy. We know there are problems with the economy, and the polls support that. People don't feel comfortable with Democrats handling it. But the truth is, we have more job creation now than we had in a long time. And we're not talking about that because we are confused by the noise. And Fox has this captivated audience where they can continue to do this, where we've seen that fact checking these people don't matter because after a week after the fact check, according to the studies, they go right back to believing the noise from Fox News. And it is absolutely dangerous when you see that most of the people, 32% of the people in this poll are Republicans, believe that we should be attacking the government. So just if we're gonna hold Trump accountable for inciting people, we should also be holding Fox. And we've seen what happened when they're held accountable, they lose lawsuits.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below because that makes you a member, and members allow us to be independent, honest. We can be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.